for that one. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the WXV tournament. This was the last week for WXV Tier 2 and WXV Tier 3. Tier 1 has one more game left, one more round left this week. Basically, championships are going to be England versus New Zealand again. There's no knockout, there's no relegation for them. So basically, this is just like, hey, whoever wins. We're going to be able to have smack talking skills, and we'll have a little bit of a ranking thing. But I mean, it doesn't actually honestly matter very much whatever the end results are going to be for that. Man, we already got bots out here. All right. Anyways. But WXV2, man, this was the one. This is where USA is in. USA, about midway round, wasn't really going to do much. They had just lost to Scotland. They beat Samoa, and they played Italy in this one. But ultimately, Scotland and Italy were topping the charts for this round. And then for WXV3, again, it was coming down to Ireland and Spain, who was going to be able to end up winning it all and end up going to relegation. Whoever wins in WXV3 is going to be able to relegate up back to WXV2, and whoever is in WXV2 at last place would fall down to WXV3 for next year. So some of the scores that we had, Scotland took on Japan, beating them 38-7. South Africa took it absolutely to Samoa after coming off the loss last week, and ended up beating Samoa 33-7. USA would lose to Italy 30-8. We're going to talk about that. In WXV3, Fiji, who has come purely into their own. Fiji women have come into their own since since 2020, 2021, going into the Olympics. That team has become hard to know. I remember where they were in 2014. Not fragile, but they were quiet. It was quiet, and they were feeling themselves out. But after the pandemic, they turned on another notch. Boom, they became something. Fiji destroyed Kazakhstan 118-0. Kenya, let's go over the top on Colombia 21-5, and Ireland ending up beating Spain to be able to get relegation into WXV2, beating them 15-3. Now let's talk about this Italy versus USA game. As I said before, this one isn't one that was going to be a big changer for the USA. Beating Samoa, it kept them somewhere in the mix, at least of having a win. Bottom tiers were really between Samoa, South Africa. Japan was kind of in the middle, at least to some extent. So there wasn't to worry about relegation. But for Italy, this was a game that was going to make the difference between whether or not they were going to be able to win this year's tournament or coming in second place. And what was the expectations needed for them to get through was that for Italy to win over Scotland or the WXV tournament, Italy was going to have to win by 25 points and score 4 tries to be able to get the bonus point to get the win over Scotland. Scotland, however, obviously had already finished their game by the time this one went down, beating Japan, as I said, 38-7. The USA in this one, though, was a lot of testing. Now, Mason Hyde, who is the interim coach for USA Rugby, basically said, hey, I'm basically trying to see what the girls can do. I want to be able to warm up the USA girls and see, how they can perform in this next setup, and see what we got for the future, which everything is supposed to be leading for the 2025 Rugby World Cup women's, and being able to, get them ready, because this is a young team. I had a feeling like this game wasn't going to be very favorable for the USA women. Obviously, the Scotland game was a really good indicator. But again, Scotland is a really veteran team who really knows what they're doing. They play pro. They have consistent games. They do what they do. It wasn't surprising. Italy is in a similar boat. They're not as good as Scotland, but they've been proficient. Watching this game, you kind of saw it. Like, again, you see the sparks that were happening through it. With the USA women, you definitely were able to see the big breaks that they were able to do. They got players that can sneak in. The one issue they had was tackling, and this was against I'm not going to lie, a little bit of a sloppy Italy team. Their passing wasn't going that great. I think Italy was a tad bit slow, but I think conditioning kind of caught up with everybody, and Italy just had better conditioning overall, especially whenever they turned up in the second half. It was a close game at halftime. I think it was like 7-3 at halftime. It was a close game, but again, conditioning and experience goes over. USA just was getting ground down. Great try that they ended up having in that second half. But ultimately, Italy took it. But this is where it goes, a spoiler, man. Those 8 points that USA did, that ended Italy's campaign. Italy would fall to second. Scotland would take the win and get the first ever WXV2 trophy, which means at least they get the ranking. All right, they're gonna be they're top of the second half of the top 12 teams in. They're number 6. No, they'll be number 7 ranked team in the world versus everyone, because they can't relegate up for another 2 years. So great. Like, awesome. So I'm happy for it. It's actually a really good tournament. Like I said, the WXV1 is happening. Obviously, it's all played on Rugby Pass TV. And even though I'm not really talking that much WXV1 because I don't think they need that much. England versus New Zealand is definitely one of the premier rivalries that has been started since 2017 Rugby World Cup. At minimum, whenever England really started paying out their women to play, that is two styles. Open style for New Zealand with speed typically, and of course the strong, and I talked about this on the Rugby Odds show. England has a big team. They're a thick team. They're a power team. They smash people. They're not one of my favorite teams, despite that, but they smash people, and it's a good little mix-up. I mean, the Rugby World Cup, they played each other just recently, and New Zealand took it up, and that was a great game. So I would suggest getting a chance to watch that if you do have a chance to. But otherwise, man, shout out to WXV, shout out to the U.S., Cape Town. Man, I'm glad that they were able to get this thing going on the way that it was supposed to, and see what we can make of the tournament.
Anybody say I can't, I say I ain't convinced. Round in the city, black out the tents. Gassed up, they gon' let me, fill up the tank.